Hi, can you introduce yourself and what you did this weekend?
Yeah, my name is Christopher Rice, and I got top four at the Tinley Park Chicago Regional playing Ishizu Tearlament. So I got this mat, and I got this nice new deck box, and yeah, that's about it.
That's great. You want to get into the deck now?
Yep, let's get into it. So, like I said, it's a Shizu Tearlament, so not anything too crazy, but some choices I made that were different thanks to some new cards that have just came out that I think everybody should look into trying out. So we got two Rhinoheart. It's pretty much standard. I think you could play three, but I didn't want to because after I see the first one, I don't want to see a second one most of the time. Three Merly, three Sheeran, and three Havness. So you're three of each of your fusing Tearlaments, standard. Ishizu Engine, three Keldo, the best one. Three Medora, the second best one. Three Kelbeck, Mills 5, third best one. I side these out a lot of times in the mirror match. And one Agido. I know this is kind of 50-50 on people playing the one Agido. My testing without the one Agido, I felt like I just wanted to have it to be able to go into off the search from the Keldo in any matchup that wasn't tier, and sometimes even against the tier matchup if you've already established some control of the game. And then the tech for this regional, and probably going forward, I think a lot more players are going to move on to this, especially in the future next year when Kashtira gets more support and you have to be worrying about losing your Kit Colossus from the extra deck. Was I ran the 3 King of the Swamp and 1 Polymerization. So King of the Swamp lets us go into Rule Kalos and Kaleido Heart more easily without having to have Kit Kalos in the grave, which allows you to sequence your plays differently. And several times during the regional, I was able to go into, let's say, Rule Kalos first or Kaleido Heart first before making Kit Kalos. So that way Kit Kalos would be more guaranteed to go through because I could play through the interruption better. Polymerization was very, very strong. Every game I opened Polymerization, it assisted in winning the game. In the mirror match, it allows you to play through Dweller by being able to make Kaleido Heart or Kit Kalos or Rule Kalos straight from your hand. It allows you to make Mud Dragon from your hand more easily to finish on a Dweller. It allows you to unbrick the strange hands that you open up sometimes where you have too many Bestials or too many Ishizu cards. Yeah, so some interesting plays that came up was like fusing Agitos and Kelbecks into Garua and milling 10, fusing extra Bestials and a Bestial on the field into Guardian Chimera, which is an extra deck to be able to then draw more cards, pop a card. Very good. It lets you out Floodgates, like Macro and Defissure. I mean, you're throwing the cards away because you're not going to be able to get them back, but it's the tempo that matters with this deck because you can so easily get over 8,000 damage. And then we have our Bestial Engine, so 3 Magnamut, it's the best one, 3 Druid Swarm, it's the second best one. And then I played just one Sarnier. So I was split on playing 40 cards or more than 40 cards. If I played more than 40 cards, it would have been just to play more copies of Sarnier. But I decided I just wanted to have 40 cards, so that would be the most likely to mill tier names on every single mill. And the chance of getting 2 Bestials in the opening hand is better if you go over 40 and run the more Sarniers, but I didn't think it was worth it when I'd just rather be milling tier names. You have to run at least one of the Sarnier, I think, because you need to have access to multiple names, because sometimes you open 2 Druisworm, and you can only use 1 Druisworm return, so you just run the problems there. It could even be correct to run 2 Sarnier and 2 Druisworm because of that. Next, we got Paralino and Terraforming. Card's insane. I mean, anytime you open Paralino, you're going to win, unless you get extremely unlucky. I mean, there are times where you mill 8 or 11, 15 cards, and you hit only one name, and that one name gets Fishshield. So that feels bad. It's going to happen sometimes. We have our 1-ofs. So Instant Fusion, mandatory. And our 3 Tearlament 1-ofs. So Crime, split on playing 2 Soliek in 1 Crime, or 2 Soliek and no Crime. I decided to just go for 1 of each. And just 1 Scream, because this card is not good going second. Having to be able to force this through into the opponent's board is almost never working. Going first, it is good to search. A lot of times I'd search this instead of Merly, as long as I had a tier name already available to bring back off Kikalos. And then Sullik is just great. That's definitely the most powerful one. It bails you out of a lot of strange game states where I mean I had some matchups where I was just Sullik grinding for multiple turns and I ended up their entire board was 4 or 5 monsters whose effects had been negated against the Sprite deck, for example. So moving into the extra deck, we have the one Kit Kalos, the one Rule Kalos, and the one Kaleido Heart. So this is your Tearlament fusions. The extra deck's going to be very interesting after in the new year when we have to somehow cope with the Cashier deck. I don't know how I would fit running a second Kaleido and a second Kit Kalos in right now. I think you have to make some really awkward choices. So, but this works for right now. I did get Kit Kalos cherries, and I did get Kit Kalos banished by Cashier Unicorn, but I was still able to win those games because I was still able to make Kaleido Heart and Rule Kalos very easily by fusing with King of the Swamp. Yeah. Next up are rest of our fusions. So we have the standard other 3 1-of fusions. We have Predaplant, Garua, and Mud Dragon. Garua comes up a lot more in this version because of polymerization and fusing into it using your cards from hand. Dragstapelia, very strong, being able to go into this alongside Rule Kalos on the opponent's turn by milling into King of the Swamps is pretty nice, and Mud Dragon, good card. Usually I was just using it to make Time Thief Redoer or a Dweller. I was pretty much never leaving it on the board because in the mirror match, usually when I was summoning it, I was going first, and it was better just to overlay into a rank 4. Then the 2 extra fusions that are not in the standard build, but should be played in the King of the Swamp build. So we have the Grapha fusion from the new Dark World structure deck, and we have Guardian Chimera from a while ago, as everybody knows from playing the branded fusion decks. So Guardian Chimera can't be targeted when you have polymerization in the grave. Very easy because polymerization is going to be in the grave when you use it, and polymerization being used is really consistent because you can always shuffle it back into the deck and search it with King of the Swamp. So some games I was able to use polymerization 2 or 3 times because of grinding for long game 1s, game 2s, shuffling back King of the Swamps, shuffling back polymerization multiple times. And the fact it can't be targeted is really very powerful in the mirror match. If you have Perlino up and Chimera becomes the largest fusion on the board. It's always going to be the largest fusion. It's going to be bigger than any of your opponent's fusions, and it can't be targeted by Dragstapelia, it can't be targeted by Kaleido Heart, it can't be targeted by any of the standard outs, Sulliek. It can't be crimed because it has no activated effect after it's been summoned, so they can't out it that way. I won games in the mirror match where I basically just summoned Chimera and just beat them down, even though I'd be far behind in cards. Maybe they dwellered me. It's okay because I just summoned Chimera and they cannot out the Chimera without going into Zeus. And when you know that's the only way they can out it, you can stop them from being able to achieve that line. Next up, the Grapha Dragon, like I said, really, really good card. Really glad I played this. So the Grapha Dragon, you might not know its effect. It lets you change the effect of an opponent's card to your opponent discards a card. So that means if your opponent activates it's only on normal spell and normal traps and monster effects. So this can be summoned by using King of the Swamp because King of the Swamp substitutes for Grapha, Dark World Dragon. That lets you interrupt ahead of time your opponent a lot of times. So if you mill some names, they usually will allow the first effect to go through. A lot of people will not shuffle or bestial the very first effect because they want to save it to hit the fusions that have the interrupting effects. But you can punish that by, instead of making Kit Kalos, you make this first. Then you can negate the shuffler in their grave, guaranteeing your next fusion to go through. So that was a very powerful play. That came up in pretty much every mirror I think I played. I played 5 mirrors, and I think I used that in every mirror. So in the non-mirrors, it lets you negate powerful blowout cards like Evenly Matched, Triple Tactics Talents. Those are the kind of cards that you're trying to save this effect for. I did have a game where I needed to negate Imperm with it, negating Imperm on Rule Kalos. And the card that you discard should normally be a card that's going to get an effect from being sent, because this allows you to trigger your tiers on your opponent's turn. If you send a tier, you can send a Miller to mill 5 in the non-mirror match, or you can send a Shuffler. Alright, sorry, we had a little interruption there with the camera problem. So I just wanted to run the extra deck monsters besides the fusions that allow me to improve my consistency. So we kept Dark and we kept Sprint, but we cut the other links because these are the 2 that improve your consistency. Then we have our last 3 cards in extra deck. You played Zeus, Baguska, Dweller. I think these all are pretty obvious why you play them. Zeus was cut at some point in the deck building process to fit and test other cards, but it just kept coming back to Zeus because you need a way to out multiple floodgates, and you need a way to out the untargetable monsters that sometimes get summoned. Most notably is Avermax. So then we move on to the side deck. We have our 4 mandatory side-ins for every mirror, going first or second. We went with 1 Triple Tactics Talent and 3 Ghost Bell. Ghost Bell is by far the best card in my side deck for the regional and in testing. It's extremely powerful in the mirror. Being able to stop a shuffler almost always guarantees that you win that turn, because if you have Bell in hand, you can be very greedy. You can mill 5, you can mill 10 cards, you can hit as many names as possible. Your opponent's going to respond with shufflers, you're going to respond with your shufflers to their effects, and then you are going to be able to use the Bell to force through some of the effects. And once you force through some of the effects, and your opponent has wasted their resources for the next turn, they're very far behind. The 1 talents, I just went with the 1 talents and not 2 or 3 because I have horrible luck with this card where every time I have played 3, I always end up drawing 2 in 4 or 5 rounds. I'm going to have a game where I lose because I opened 2 talents and I needed that other card to be something else. Other going second card, I played 3 Dark Ruler No More. So it was between this and the Lightning Storm for destroying the large monster boards and the Sprite and Flunderies matchups. I decided to go with the Dark Ruler because Lightning Storm just sometimes is not a good top deck. Sometimes you've already committed a Havness onto the board. There's not an easy way to clear that Havness off the board, but your opponent is in a commanding position, while Dark Ruler is always live. And the fact that you can't deal the damage is pretty much irrelevant. Also, I anticipated that Sprite was going to be a harder matchup than I think other tier players give it credit for, because the boards they can put up with the Testudo when they go first are very, very hard to crack. You basically have to have a card like Dark Ruler. If you can stop them during their turn from establishing that board, I mean, that's the other route that you could go down, but I would rather just have the Dark Ruler. It makes things a lot simpler. I don't have to have multiple cards to interact with them on their turn. I can just draw the Dark Ruler and break that unbreakable board. Or exclusively, the Flunderies matchup, we played Banshee, 2 Zombie World, and 1 set rotation. So I decided to go with the 1 set rotation instead of 2 Banshees because I wanted to be able to side this in going first every time. And set rotation is very powerful because the Flunderies decks are all siding in evenly matched, or even main decking evenly matched. And so being able to activate that set rotation to give the Zombie World and then give them the Tearlament's field spell and stop them from evenly matching is very, very powerful. It lets you feel a lot safer. You don't have to search Crime. Okay, then you can search Solic, and you just are in a really good spot. The 1 Banshee, I mean, it's pretty obvious. You need at least 1 Zombie World, 1 Banshee, I think, right now, because I do think Flunderies is a tough matchup when you have no interaction to stop them. They're going to be trying to floodgate you, so unfortunately you try to floodgate them back. And you can get by with just 1 Zombie World by just shuffling it back, but I did go with 2 just in case because a lot of Flunderies players are playing Cosmic Cyclone to then banish the Zombie World, so you can't shuffle it back. So you just was trying to get ahead of that. But like I said, I didn't play a Flunder at the regional, so I didn't side those in. Back row destruction cards, did 2 Twin Twisters and the 1 Heartbeat. So it was 3 Twin Twister until the last second, and I decided to put in the 1 Heartbeat just because it's searchable. And Heartbeat can be sided in much better as a going first card. And I think you want to have at least 1 back row destruction against those kind of decks when you're going first, because they are going to side in silly things like Necro Valley, and a lot of sometimes they can activate Necro Valley. You don't have the shufflers in the grave, and wow, you just lost the game, right? But instead, you can search Heartbeat, and you're good. It doesn't matter if you had Perlino or not. You can always just search Heartbeat off kit, and then you're good. Funny enough, like I said, I never played against Flunder. I didn't play against any true anti-meta deck. I sided Heartbeat in against the Sprite decks to hit the Smashers away or to double cross away in the standby phase, just so that it's not going to interact with me on the rest of my turn. And I used Heartbeat in a mirror match to win by flipping it on my opponent's turn and shuffling his Perlino away, and then discarding a shuffler, which then interrupted the rest of his play. So the card is versatile, and it's good to mill. If I could, You know, maybe I'll just side 3 Heartbeat because it's just good to mill, and I think you want to have as many cards that are good to mill as possible. And the last card was the one Scattershot. I never used the card's effect, but I did side it in a couple times. It just didn't matter. All the times I sided it in were when my opponent already used their own time card, or we ended up just not being able to play the game at all, so the Scattershot didn't have a chance to get sent. And so, yeah, that's the deck. Shoutouts would be, you know, the regional ran fairly well. We had some hiccups at registration, but after that they did a good job and kept rounds moving fairly quickly. The whole St. Louis Yu-Gi-Oh scene, we have multiple locals with a lot of really good players. I think we're doing a good job at growing the scene here in St. Louis and improving the skill of players in the area, you know. And so we have to shout out Yeti Gaming, Mystic TCG, and the Collector Store, all 3 great locals. And I think one of the only cities where we have multiple great locals to play at. Shout out to the guys I rode up with. Shout out to the Wiseguys. Check out the Facebook page. Check out the YouTube channel. Great group of guys. Great organization. Just talking about Yu-Gi-Oh, talking about decks, sharing news, sharing perspective about the game. So you feel free to check it out. Shout out to everybody who I played. I had a lot of really good opponents. I had a lot of great matches. It sounds strange because I did do really good in the mirrors, but I think all the mirrors were very interactive, and even though they were all 2-0 victories by me, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth. Even when you win, every game feels well fought in the mirror. Against non-mirrors, it's a little less interactive because a lot of times you can just blow them out. But still, there's a lot of good Yu-Gi-Oh. I like this format a lot, even though it's Tier 0 format. I mean, I'm playing the Tier 0 deck, so maybe I'm a little biased, but I think it's a good format. So that's pretty much it. We'll catch you guys next time.